I'm back. Yeah, you're back. Yes, you need to go and get your mic unmuted. Hello,
Yeah,
my.
yeah. But when I said that, there was no sound, there was no volume. I was muted. Good evening, Sham. How are you?
I am good, Malarvili. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to have you back.
Yeah, you're
I'm
looking very
thinking,
101 Dalmatians. You're looking today.
can yes, thank
Yeah.
you. Maybe I do
Yeah.
feel like a Dalmatian today.
No. You don't want to feel like a Dalmatian.
you know,
No, no.
it's
You're
good
never.
to have you back on the
Uh,
show so that we can actually get to do some work. It's been a long time, isn't it?
Yes, it has. I've been, like little spurts once in a while. I come in and then I fly off again and do something else somewhere else and, message you all while you and Ashok hold fort. And you've been doing a brilliant job. And, but I must say that I'm very, very happy to be back. Um,
Yay!
yeah,
And you
yeah.
brought somebody back with you today.
Yes, I brought somebody back with me. Literally, quite literally. It's the month of adaptive leaders, and it's our second week going into June, and we're going to talk about digitalization for exponential results. And like Malar said, I brought back someone. What she meant by that is that I met our guest for this week, Azim, literally about maybe a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago, 2 to 3 weeks ago, when we were together in a project with a central bank in this part of the world. And yeah, so we had a few chats, got to know each other a little bit more, and I was very intrigued by his depth of knowledge and subject matter expertise around digitalization. So he is, I mean, little did I know at that time until I went and dug around and, a little bit more into his history and found out that the man lives and breathes innovation, right? He's a respected thought leader in the area. He's authored 3 books, not to mention he's speaking about his love and his passion for innovation. Right across from Europe to Middle East to this part of the world to Asia Pac, right down to Australia, right? So he's got some interesting insights. He does a lot of work with large as well as large organizations, medium-sized organizations, as well as governments, right? So that's the serious part of him. He has another passion, and we were just talking about it: coffee. Okay, the man talks about coffee like the French talk about wine. Okay, so I don't know how we're going to talk about coffee and innovation together, but I'm sure we'll find a way, right? So we better bring him up, right, and ask him all these questions that we have for him.
So we need to stay
Um,
away from the coffee because otherwise we might change the name of our show.
yeah, no
Coffee,
coffee,
coffee with Lifa. Welcome, Azim.
no.
I don't know whether you heard the praises Shamini saying that's the nicest you get. Okay, I'm getting limelight now. But what I remember is this Azim, if Shamini messages and says we must have Azim on our show, then we know we must have you on the show.
Mhm.
So welcome. Thank you for saying yes to the show and uh, for being here. Author of 3 books. Oh my goodness, it is just so amazing. Number one, and of course, I'm a very proud Malaysian, especially when we bring in authors. So welcome to the show. How are you today, Azim?
Thank you, Mala. Thank you, Shamini. I'm doing very good. So I just had my coffee I think about half an hour ago. I had my Costa Rican coffee. But
Wow.
one secret is that I don't drink a lot of coffee.
Ah,
Maximum is 2 cups, and I sometimes I do just small, very small amount. I drink coffee.
mm,
It's not that I need to be caffeinated. I drink
mm,
coffee because I enjoy the taste, and actually I enjoy making coffee. So
mm.
Mala, Shamini, whenever you are in Kuala Lumpur, we can have a coffee session together at my house.
Can no problem. Be careful what you what you call this say, and the invitations that you do. You never know what you're going to get, in terms of replies and what do you call this acceptance. Yeah. So yeah, yeah. So it's interesting that you have self control when it comes to things that are you're very passionate about or you love a lot. You only manage to do two. I sometimes go up to three, and that's just boring instant coffee. But we're going to get back into your story. All right. So we want to dig out stories from you, and I'm going to ask you for your first story, actually, and that's your story about transitioning into the space of innovation and digitalization. I'm sure there's a story behind it, and
Right.
you told a little bit to us the other day in a pre-show chat. Let's tell us a little bit more, and also our viewers. Go for it.
Right. Thank you, Sham. I think this starts. I think the story on digitization started. I think more than 2 decades ago. I started my career as a scientist, as a chemist, and I was working with a chemical company in a British-based chemical company. And one of I was managing people, about I think 15 over people. So their job is to formulate car colors for millions of cars which comes out on a regular basis. So at that point, my input into digital started back then, where we are using algorithm to predict. Okay, with just certain number of car paints, how can we match any color of the car which comes out in the world? So we were
Mm,
working with physicists, scientists, etc., to digitize the matching of colors. So that was an interesting experience for me. That was back, I think, in the mid 90s. And then
mm,
apart from that, we were also working on a global database of what new cars are coming out in the world, what would their color be. So at that point, it was the beginning of why I saw the important part of digital and data. But as I evolved, I think back in the year 2000, I started Alpha Catalyst. I started delving deeper. I shift my career from doing work in the scientific world, started
mm,
doing more work in innovation and transformation.
mm,
Then I saw, okay, for large organization, even SMEs to innovate, they need to know four things. They need to know where should they innovate and transform. And secondly, they need to
mm,
capture ideas. Okay, what's the best idea? Thirdly, they need to work on the project and then implement them. And while that is happening, uh, if you were to do it manually, it takes a long time. That was my experience back then. So this is where I delve deeper. Okay, how can I make this better? How can I digitize this? And then what I started doing with my team was to do a research. What are the biggest barrier that people face when it comes to innovation at work? And then the biggest barrier is a lot of people don't know where to innovate. And then,
mm,
secondly, the barrier that they face, they feel that their bosses are very risk averse. Okay,
mm,
then let's move on. And then, okay, in a survey that we did a few years ago, then we asked, okay, what is important for you to innovate and transform in your workplace? So what came out on top was leadership support and trust, a clear process to innovate, and they
mm,
want to be able to be recognized in their innovation effort. And when we dig deep into the requirements, we saw that all this can happen better if there is a digital solution. There is a way
mm,
to capture data. There's a way to allow for collaboration and communication. So back in 2014, 2015, my team, there were 6 of us, we started building a software that digitizes innovation management and transformation. So what we were doing was trying to build a software like Facebook, but it's for innovation and transformation. So that's when we
Mm,
started going deeper, and over the years we have many clients using it. Then we saw that initially the adoption was not very good. People were not ready, they were afraid to use it until the pandemic. Then we saw a shift. Suddenly people were open to try and do things
mm,
different. So that's how I think we began going into digital. It was a problem that our clients were facing, the problem
mm,
that my team was facing. So we started embedding digital, 2 parts. The first part, digital as a way to make, I think, my our job easier as consultant, and then digital as an offering for our clients, so that they have solution that they can digitize. So for any SMEs which out there, or any even large organization out there, so I think my message to you about digitization is not about you digitizing to make things efficient, but it's also exploring what is it that you can do to offer a digital solution for your clients. So that's how I think I
mm,
began my journey. And
mm,
I think looking at where I am now, it's exciting. I don't think the journey is not boring. It's getting more exciting. There's just so many things to do in the next, I think, 3 to 5 years, with especially with the rise of, I think, artificial intelligence, and
mm.
then the lower cost of digitization. So when these two is combined, there's a lot more exciting things happening. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. So that's my,
Mm.
I think, story, how I begin, I think, going into digital.
Digital. I want to. I mean, I want to recap on what you said. I thought the 3 points were very interesting. Is that uh, leadership support and trust is a
Yes,
key that came out. A
yes,
process to help you innovate, and
yes,
recognition for those ideas, whether those
yes,
ideas we launched or we go went ahead, but those ideas need to be recognized, right?
yes.
And so these were the things that people said they wanted to have when you want to move into something that's innovative. You want to do something that's in the innovation space, right? You want to change strategy and think, or not change strategy, or skew, move it towards being more innovative. These are the three things that people want, right?
Yes.
And you also so that in itself is very very interesting. You also said something about how people were hesitant to look into innovation, or to ramp up or look at it until COVID happened, right?
Yeah.
And COVID, and we hear this recurring theme that COVID, and because of COVID accelerated a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which people thought was going to only happen in 20 years' time, 15 years' time, 10 years' time. Phew, COVID came and people did it, right? So what was it about COVID that overcame? All right. So there must be either a bigger away from that COVID brought than this away from that people had initially about innovation and going into that space of innovation. So what I'm trying to say is that what was it before, and what was it that COVID that happened in COVID that said, this one I don't care about this anymore because there's a bigger one that I need to solve. And yeah, could you share what
Okay.
your patterns or insights that you have seen?
All right. So, when we, I think one of the first book that I wrote together with my co-author, Dr. Suraya, the title of the book is Leading Innovation. It's about how do
Mm,
leaders within the Asian context innovate. So when we were doing
mm,
our research, we find that the biggest driver of innovation is desperation, suffering. Because if you are not suffering, you don't
mm.
change, nothing happens. You are fine. So
Yeah.
when we had this hypothesis that if you were to look at the most progressive economy, the most efficient economy, look at South Korea, Japan, Germany, most of them came out of suffering. So they had very little resource and they had to find ways to innovate and transform. If not, they can't survive. So the need to innovate is the one that is the key driver to innovation. And the second one, second case is in India. In India is the land of innovation. They have something called Jugaad innovation, where the people at the bottom were actually looking at solution to solve their day-to-day issues. They don't need permission. They're just trying to survive, to find a way to innovate. There's just so many examples. One of my favorite is Jaipur food. It's a prosthetic foot that costs only about 20 to 30 US dollars. That is what they call it. That is used on your people who needs artificial limb. In other developed countries, it costs a lot because we have the what they call that, the support within the ecosystem. We have good hospitals, etc. Let's say in Malaysia and Singapore, we have different bodies supporting the people with the need of artificial limb. But in India, they didn't have a choice because they need to work, especially in the farms, etc. So somebody actually came up with a solution to solve a problem that the community was facing. They are making money, not that much, but at the same time, they are solving a problem. So what I saw that during the pandemic, a lot of people shifted to digitization, started to look at innovation transformation because they didn't have a choice. There's no other way out. They are trapped. So they had to find new ways of finding sources of growth, and they had to find new ways of not having face-to-face meetings, etc. So again, I think, let me recap, because of lack of choice, desperation, that's how we move forward. In fact, this similar trends not only happens in SME, but also happens in government. For example, certain policy, certain regulation, for years, you can't do this, you can't do that. Because of the pandemic, you didn't have a choice. Then it shifted. And once it shifted, it has stretched to another level. Then we are open to do things differently. One example is one of my client, Saim Dabi Plantation. During the pandemic, they suffered a lot because they could not bring in foreign laborers from other countries. And they've been looking at digitization for a long time. But because of the pandemic, they saw the need to transform the way that they think. They have the right strategy, they have the right people, but things did not move fast enough. But with the pandemic, things accelerated. So, for example, Saim Dabi Plantation, they've been hiring people to do drones, robotics, artificial intelligence. So, I would say that because of that trigger, the plantation sector is one of the sexiest sector to be in already. I saw that happening in Kedah. I was there for a project, and I look around and I saw drones flying everywhere. That means, why did it happen? Because during the pandemic, the people from Thailand, before the pandemic, people from Thailand used to come to Kedah to help with the farming, etc. But because of the pandemic, we didn't have a choice. They need to start using drones for many things, from putting in the fertilizer, monitoring things, etc. So that's my view on what drives transformation.
Before I hand it over to Malar, I just want to tell our viewers that Kedah is a state in the northern part of Malaysia, and it's very close to the border with Thailand. All right. So many people in Malaysians who want to go up to Thailand sometimes drive up to Kedah into the next state, Perlis, and then into Thailand. Malar, over to you. You know, you're waiting.
Thank you. No, I'm not sure whether I was waiting because I was trying to get my map right when you started saying Kedai and Thank you. I really, I thought that the bit, I'm not surprised when you said the biggest driver for innovation is suffering. Um, and I say it just because I find that sometimes as a small organization, when I work with large organizations and they have big budgets, I can see how uh, how creativity and innovation doesn't take place, right? Compared to when we are really working on a tight budget and trying to still make a difference and stand out. So those were some small things that had occurred. But you saying it as a person who's done the research is amazing. I want to just because you said that, I'm curious, right? A lot of times you know organizations spend lots of money on innovation training,
Mm,
innovation processes, right? And they look at design thinking, create, so a lot of things. The
Agile.
objective is to innovate, to become better. But
mm.
a lot of us also who are chosen to become better may not be in a space where we are in a survival mode. So your research says that when people are in survival, and that's natural, right? Because it's when it's a do or die, suddenly your brain works very differently, right? It's like our last minute pattern sometimes, right? Yeah. But so what is your advice to leaders who want to innovate, not when they're in the survival mode, but you need to get there, right? What would your advice be to leaders so that we can sort of increase the success factor of innovation?
Thank you. Very, very good question. Okay, I go back again to 2 decades ago. I was a scientist. Okay, because this is the essence of innovation. When I was doing R&D on a chemical process, I was doing, I think, maybe 100 experiments per month to see what sort of combination will get me a better result. I did manage to get a good result. However, my counterpart in Japan, they were much more successful because they were doing 1,000 experiment of what might work, what doesn't. So
Mm,
to innovate, it is about you knowing your goal and about you experimenting, trying, and failing. So if
mm,
to be able for you to find something different, you need an environment where there is a budget where you are given to run that experiment. If you are an R&D scientist, it's easy. If I have 1 million ringgit, that's the amount that I spend experimenting. If I have 10 million, that means I can do many more things.
mm,
However, in many corporate setting, you're trying to change their process. You're trying to create a new service, a new product. You're not allowed to experiment. You are given, okay, give me a solution, give me your idea, and once you pitch your idea, you need to you need to be able to have that confidence to say, okay, this project have got
mm,
90% success rate, and
mm,
that's is the innovation killer, because when you're trying to innovate, that means you are going into an uncertain area, so you need to run experiment, you need to run your prototype, you need to run your pilot to see what works, what doesn't. Then you iterate. Once you iterate, then you see the results. Okay, from out of 20 different ideas, maybe this 5 ideas is the best one that you're going to invest and move to the next stage, move to the next stage. So to be for smaller companies to be able to drive innovation, what you need is to have that experimentation mindset. That let's try something new, and if you fail, it's okay. But you
mm,
fail, it's not because you are not doing your work, because you failed, you tried some different iteration. It's like when you're trying a new recipe, you don't know what works, what not. So I think as the job as a leader is to reduce the fear of failure of your people. That's number one. Okay, if your people are not afraid, and your people know that when you innovate, you are looking at your attempt, your diligence in innovating. So that's brilliant. That you can actually now with digital tools, you are able to track that. Okay, how many experiments have you done? What is your ratio between successful project versus failed project? But as leaders, you're going to have another barrier. Let's say you allow experimentation by your people at the lower level. Okay, you see multiple good ideas. You see that, okay, for you to be able to scale, you need to invest, let's say, 500,000 to try something new. This is where your business partners, your board members will be the one hindering you from moving forward, because they are afraid. So the job of a leader is to not only manage at the lower level, but to also manage your peers and also your board members, so that they see that this is what they call that workable. So one of the key role as a leader is to find and communicate the balance of what is the risk of you trying to do something different. You're trying to implement something new versus what is the risk of status quo? What is the cost of not doing anything? There's a lot of calculation that you are able to do, and you can convert that into a mathematical model and see your risk profile. So this is where with digital tool, then you can do your what they call it. You can do your modeling. Okay, this work. If it doesn't work, but that's not enough. With AI, machine learning, you can do that, but you also need to rely on the gut feeling of your employees, especially those close to a customer. Let's say you have an idea, you don't know what to choose. So this is where digital platform comes in, and you ask your employees to share. What do you think? Will the idea work or not? So employees are more than willing sometimes to rate and give a comment to see what might work, what might not work. So again, your role as a leader is to allow for this to happen, to allow your employees to have access to such tool, to give their comments, to give their rating, what works, what not. So we are Asians are quite collective in nature. So as a leader, when you see your employees giving certain point of view, you see, okay, this is the risk that we are taking. So you feel you have that comfort. Okay, based on the experts within the company, this is their point of view. Based on the community, based on employees who's close to the customer, this is your view before you decide, do I move forward or not? So the biggest job as a leader is to actually make that decision, do I need to change or not? And you can't do it alone. So this is where that collective intelligence would come in from the internally, from the your employees. And then next one is by you using digital tools to create some form of modeling. Okay, do some form of scenarios. Okay, what might work, what might not work. So then you have two sources of data, from the people data and also from digital data. Then you feel much more comfortable doing things which is risk taking. If not, you're not going to be able to make that 20-30% shift. If not, you're going to be incremental in nature. You're just improving 3%, 5%, and that doesn't last a long time. Yeah.
That's a program on its own. I think where
Yeah.
what we should be. So I just want to check, because like there was just so much. I'm wondering whether I'm connecting the dots
Hmm.
correctly, right? So we started off with saying that we need to feel like it's survival. So when we're in a survival mode, we innovate the best,
Okay.
right? And that's how we started. But it was really interesting because you then said, the role of a leader is actually to balance, what is the cost of status quo.
Mm.
And I'm just wondering, when you talk about that balance, when we are looking at what is the price we pay if we don't change, i.e., remain status quo. I think, am I right by saying that's
Yes.
where the survival instinct comes now? Now, when the survival instinct comes, for example, I suppose naturally what comes with it is the fear of failure. Now, for me to innovate, we need to do this, but what if I fail? And what
Yep.
you seem to be saying is that this is why, so yes, we need to survive really well. We're going to innovate. But as a leader, you are helping them to manage or overcome their fear, because the fear is the idea of innovation is to figure out different ways and get rid of the ways that doesn't work, so that we find ways that will work and get us to the exponential results that we are looking for as a leader, which is why we
Yes.
are going into innovation. You're saying that. And what you're
Yes.
also saying is that you take the data from the wisdom from the people, and now you map it against the wisdom from the data, which is why digitalization actually plays a very important role, because now by bringing all of this together, you can minimize the risk that we take with innovation.
Yes.
I
Spot
sound
on.
right. Thank you. Thank you. I thought that was so brilliant. Thank you, Azim. So brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
very nicely put together, right? Like you said, it's a module in itself. There you go. Um, and before I take on from there, actually, there's a segue that I'd like to for us to go into. But before that, let me say hello and draw your attention to Roslan. Roslan said hi. He's a
Hi,
fan
Roslan.
on and he says hi Azim, and also we have Gerald Fernandez as always, being very supportive and making sure that comes in and says hello to us. So hi Gerald, lovely to see
Hi,
you.
Gerald.
Yeah, lovely to. And please, as you know, everyone, please put in your comments or questions. Disagree with Azim, because he, knowing him as little as I do or as short as I do, he would very much like to uh, have a discussion around your questions. Okay, so my question is this: you
Wah, macam like difficult question, eh? Is it going to be a
tak ada,
difficult one?
tak ada. I have to be better. I have to up my game, because Mala has a very good question, right? So I have to see how I must match lah. Cannot overtake, but just match lah. Um, you mentioned three things, right? One is the ability to weigh between, do we stay the status quo or do something
Hmm.
new, right? Mala talked about that. You also mentioned about the fear of failing and to
Mhm.
reduce the fear of failing. And you mentioned about finding the balance in communicating. And when you talk about communicating, you said giving feedback and hearing different points of view,
Yes.
right? So I want to zero in on the fear of failing and the ability to open yourself to feedback, open
Mm.
yourself to hearing different points of view. And if those are two or three core ingredients in the ability to innovate, right? Or your propensity to innovate. How does that sit with the Asian culture? Given that sometimes we look at, if we were to generalize, we tend to say that we're more uh, like you said, in a group, we follow the group. We look at more paternalistic. We look at hierarchy. We look at seniors to guide us, right? To make decisions. We think that the wisdom sits with the more senior leaders rather than us. So, how does that sit with the Asian culture, and what trends are you seeing? What patterns are you noticing?
Okay. There's two trends. Number one is from SME. It's quite different from a large company. So we've
Mm,
been working with a few SMEs in the past. So there are about I think 100 over people, 100, yeah, about 100 people. But their value is high. They generate like maybe about 10 million dollars a year. And another one with even with like 100 people, I think they can generate a revenue about 200 about 50 million US dollars a year. So what we see in these smaller companies, it is the founders is the one that is driving the show.
mm,
They are the talent, they are the brain behind it, and there's
mm,
a tendency among the founder-driven companies is to hire people who are followers,
mm,
people who's willing to listen to
mm,
their orders, because they don't need people who can think too much. They need people who can execute, making sure that there's compliance, etc. And when it comes to the next generation, this is where they are trying to groom their children to take over.
mm,
So that's the trend which I'm seeing, because a lot of these founders, they are in their 60s, 70s, they want to retire, but they are stuck because the people that they are hired at senior management is not designed to grow. They are designed to follow orders, follow instructions, etc. So one of the companies that I work with, they saw the problem. So what the top management did was work with me, and
mm.
we work with their I think top 10 senior management, and we work with them. So what do they think that what are the new ways to create growth for the company? because the founder wants to retire. He said, okay, it's enough already. I want to do something else. I want to do something different. So what the founder did was to start empowering the people at the uh, lower level, and he actually gave them permission to try something different. If not, they are very compliant. They're not used to trying something different, because that was the founder's role. So what they did was to create small teams and run pilot programs, trying different models, etc. So the founder was willing to listen and give funding to create a spin-off for the company. And
Mm.
when we did the calculation together with the management team with that idea, we calculated that it could actually double their current revenue if they were to go to their pathway. So this is where if you're an SME, okay, you know that you need to be aware is what type of people are you hiring. Are you
Mm.
hiring people to execute, or are you hiring people to explore new business opportunities? So this is where you need to start having what we call a dual track on your company. Track number one is you execute as efficiently as possible. This is where
Mm.
digitization would come in. You're but trying to be as efficient, and when you're efficient, you are exponential. So
Mm.
there are now a trend coming where they are now smaller, bigger companies with a team of, let's say, 5 people. You can make 1 million US dollars. With a team of 10, you can make $20 million because of the digital effort. But
Mm.
before you
Mm.
do that, okay, the first one is the efficient track. The other track
Mm.
is the exploration track, trying to
Mm.
find new sources of growth, trying to find market, building brand. So in a company, you maybe 95% or 90% of your people should be in the delivery mode, doing things as efficient as possible. And then another 5 to 10% of the people is to try to find new sources of growth for next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. You have that portfolio, then
Mm.
chances of you stumbling into something new is higher. So now, going back to my answer, that okay, that's what SMEs are doing now. Large companies are doing the same also. Many of the GLCs that we work with are now developing what they call it, internal innovation project teams. So they're given the funding, they're given the mandate for people to start an experiment. Again, our formula that what we saw, majority of employees are not interested. Maybe 1%, 2 to 3% of the employees are interested to innovate. So this is where,
Mm.
as a leader, your role is to provide a channel for ideas to emerge, problems to emerge. Once the ideas have emerged, then the role of the leader is to provide a safe place for the employees to share their ideas and experiment, to be given the permission to try and experiment. But we need the right policies as well. For example, as an employee, maybe you can spend 80% of their time on your routine
Mm.
job and 20% on running experiment, doing things differently. So when you run experiment, if you fail, it's okay. But you need to define what is the type of failure that you are
Mm.
facing. So
Yeah.
Tata Group in India, they are really good at this. So they have the biggest failure in the world award. And even with Air Asia, you can see within Air Asia, they have failed many things. They tried to do many things, it doesn't work, but they
Mm.
move on. So maybe 20 years ago, Asians are not ready. But now, I think Asians are the one actually leading the innovation charge from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from China. We are really spearheading innovation globally. A lot of the Western countries
Mm.
are looking at Asian as an example of innovation, especially in public sector, because we are bolder, because we are desperate. Just like an example in Rwanda. Rwanda, they had a regulation on, they were the earliest country in the world to regulate drones, because they have a problem of delivering blood to rural area. So they are the
Mm.
first to regulate drones. Because of that, other countries start learning from them as well.
Yeah.
I see countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Singapore as well. We are also doing a lot of policy experiments as well. So, to those startups out there, when you're trying to do something, startups or SMEs, when you're trying to do something different, if you are stuck from a policy, regulatory issue, it is your role to go and collaborate with the government. There are many channels that you can go in, collaborate to change the way that you are doing things, the government is doing things to allow you to grow and make things happen.
Mm.
Right. So that's my answer.
The, yeah. There's one point that you made that I really love. You said you need to look for the people who like
Yeah.
enjoy innovating, right? It's
Yes.
it goes back to the basic basis of talent acquisition, right? Or acquiring the right skill, mindset for
Ah.
innovation. And I think sometimes we miss the plot. Organizations miss the plot when they kind of say, like, we want to go innovation, and it's an innovation right throughout the whole organization, right? And
Yeah.
there might be people who may not be ready for it, or uh, may not be attuned to it. And like you also rightly said, you have to have 90%, 80% to 90% who are doing making sure that everything is running efficiently and effectively, right?
Yes.
So there was for me, that is a I think it was it's a important ingredient that sometimes we forget or we miss when we're thinking about innovation in from an organizational perspective, right? We assume that it's like one of those things that we all have to do. It's
Um,
like a culture of service kind of a thing. Um,
Sham, before
and
I move on, I just need to caution you. What you said is actually very dangerous.
oh, okay, good. Tell me
Don't
why.
hire people who is innovative if your company is not ready for them.
Mm, okay.
There are many cases that we work with. Large organization, multinational organization, they set up innovation teams, bring in the best brain, but after
Mm,
about 6 months to a year, everybody leave. Why? Because the culture is not there, the management is not ready for them.
correct.
So this is where, when you are ready to innovate, you need to look at, okay, is the culture ready, is the organization ready, and bring in.
Mm,
Uh, you need to have the right policy, and also you need to have the right KPI, for example, at even at board level. So if that
mm,
doesn't happen, you train people up. Training people is even worse. I'm sorry, Mala and
okay.
Sham, because
Yeah.
I've been training people on innovation, but I give them a warning. After my training, your people will be frustrated if you don't change anything, because they have the
Mm,
idea, they know what to do, but nobody was listening to them.
yeah.
Yeah,
Their
that's the
hands are
part.
tied.
But
Yeah.
that's a caveat that I mentioned to, I think, most of my when I train people on innovation, is that this is for your own personal development. This can be used anywhere in your work. But I do have a philosophy for innovation. It's about embracing constraints to innovate. So when you innovate, you need to do things within the box. So many, you need to
Mm,
know what you can't do. And sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission, because you ask for permission, ah, why did you do this? Nobody asked you to do this. This is not in the
yeah.
policy. But if you do something and it works, you don't break any policy, then that will become a new norm. So this is
Mm,
something that we need to be aware of when we run training programs. Is the company ready to implement what we have taught?
yeah. No reason for you to apologize, because that's the same thing that Muller and I also hold, that the training doesn't work if the ecosystem, there's no secondary ecosystem to support it. All right. Support the wanting to experiment, the wanting to put the ideas into practice, the or I can do it, but nothing else is doing it. So, so we are with you on that. Right?
Thank
We're
you.
totally with. So when I
And
talk
I mean,
about,
sorry.
yeah, sorry, no, carry on, carry on.
No, so I've been wanting to address Roslan, but before that, I wanted to just say, I think all the things that you say, I mean, I think it's very clear for the innovation part, right?
Mm,
Because we want something, but we're not willing to pay the price. And I think you've really showed people who are listening in. innovation is not just this nice to have fun thing. You need it's like any other seed. You need the right environment to nurture it. It's like any other change that you want to make culturally, and we make
Yes.
cultural changes because we know that the impact is actually going to be really big. And I love the part you say ask for forgiveness and not permission, right? So I mean, there's so much of wisdom there in what you're saying, and it sounds like systems thinking. Like literally, you need to bring all together for something to work. And sometimes we go on one track, and I think the bit I thought was mind blowing. As much as it looks simple, it's not either or efficient or exploration. Is you need to know how much you need to keep the current track going, and which part of it that we're going to explore. And I think I believe Roslan knows you because obviously. So Roslan says something I think he's echoing in his own words before you said it, by the way. He says this brings us into context of different elements such as leadership models, mindset models, again structure models, and recruitment models. And he said what Azim is explaining, I did in MDEC in transforming the technopreneur and enterprise development division, and it
Mm.
works. Sorry. Roslan, thank you for saying that. Roslan also said something interesting. He said, A grade people hire B grade people, and B grade people hire C grade people. And it's written vision, but I think he's saying the vicious cycle continues. I think this
Continue.
echoes what you said about who do you want to hire. Do you know what you want, right?
Hmm.
And how you're going to hire. Now that brings us to there are a couple of questions. Asham, shall we handle the questions first?
Go,
So
go.
I'm going to Ashok. I'm going to put you on hold because you're absent today. So we're going to give priority to Roslan first. Ashok is our one of our hosts, right? Who's not here today. All right. Rosa is asking, from the context of building a nation, what practical things and elements do you strongly believe need to be done? Uh, who should take ownership, especially the notion of Jugaad, or a bottoms up approach where not even large organizations lead, but startups and SMEs? Finally, is there a proven working model where collaboration can take place where it is led from the bottom? So there seem to be three questions. So to lead a
Wow.
nation, so big, and then I think he's saying a nation is big. So how do you do that? And who should take ownership? Because smaller companies seem to be more successful than larger organizations, and whether it can be led from the bottom. Okay,
Okay.
cheers.
Right. What I see within many uh, developing economy, it's the private sector has now been taking the lead in driving transformation. So, for example, let's say 10 years ago, where we talk about startup ecosystem, it is the government agency doing most of the work, etc., building the ecosystem. But now I see it is the number one, it is the first, is the public listed companies. For example, in Malaysia, we have Sunway iLabs. So they have actually created, uh, created their own innovation team, which is building the ecosystem, and also supporting by collaborating between small companies and large companies, and because of that they are able to influence the way innovation is done at the country level. So they have a say within the public sector as well, what things should be moving forward, etc. So that's one example of a large company, that's Sunway Labs. But from a smaller company perspective is the SMEs in crowdfunding. There's a new type of entity, we call it the equity crowdfunding, where you have smaller SMEs. They actually get licenses from Securities Commission to be able to get peer-to-peer funding for new projects, new innovative projects. So what happens here is that funding is no longer coming from the bank for an innovation project to happen. It comes from crowdfunding. It comes
Mm.
from equity funding. So you have startups gaining funding from 1 to 4 million ringgit, and they are able to do things differently. And what happens when this small uh, equity crowdfunding company help spur the SMEs or startups, then other players will come in and they are influencing the ecosystem. And this is where the power of digital platforms would come in. You can invest, let's say, 1,000 ringgit,
Mm,
1,000 US dollars, 500 US dollars to be able to support a new startup which you think will have value in the long term. So this is coming from a bottom up perspective, and when this happens, the government sees that okay, there's actually a demand for equity crowdfunding, a demand for empowering of how innovation is being financed. So they are much more liberal. They open up the sector. More people can go in. There's less requirements. So this is how bottom up innovation can happen.
mm. Can I interject at that point? And I want to make a comparison. I want to do an opposites, right? Because you started off saying in a developing economy,
Yeah.
and we were earlier on talking about Asian culture,
Yeah.
right? Singapore is one piece in that Asian culture that's a developed economy, or at least it likes to think of itself that way. Would it then be more of a, so where's the desperation? Where is the suffering, right? In comparison to maybe another economy or another country or another country. So would it then be top down, in terms of looking at building an innovation culture, or does it need to think about it differently, or come at innovation in a different way in order for it to be sustainable? I don't know. I'm
In
asking.
Singapore's case, is very different because the way that Singapore design its policy is it looks at far into the future. For example, I think
Right.
about 10 years ago, Singapore started going downwards already. That means they are building underground because they
Mm,
know they don't have land space. And
mm,
secondly, the way that it's doing budgeting is different. For example, when it comes to R&D budgets, etc., is much more liberal, and it understands the constraints that it doesn't have enough talent. So the use of foresight, let's say within Singapore, is different because they know what are the trends in the next 3 to 5 years, 7 to 10 years. I was at a
mm,
workshop about 4 weeks ago in with a panel member from Singapore. So what Singapore government is doing is to use job analytics to do job analytics. What sort of job is coming up? What
mm.
sort of jobs is going down? And they are using machine learning and AI to try and see if somebody is going to be unemployed in certain sector with the same skill set, what new jobs can they do in the future? So
Yep.
this is where the role of the government is to come up with policy and data strategy. This government agency in Singapore, the Singapore Skills Development Center, so they had to shift the role of the public sector from looking at policy to look at data, and from
Mm,
data run experiment, going into machine learning, trying to predict in the future, and then come up with specific incentive and support to transform there. So Singapore's case
mm,
is a bit different. They are looking at things from a very long-term perspective. There's a lot of fear of certain things, fear
mm,
of lack of land, fear of lack
mm.
of talent, and because of that, they prepare for the future before it's needed. So it's not firefighting. They're very proactive in their policy development and execution.
So you could make that as an analogy for organizations as well, right? In how the organizations are thinking. And I
Yeah,
know I might be putting you in a spot. If you were to give an example of like a Malaysia, Singapore kind of
yeah.
thinking in terms of organizations, have you come across like your experience about an organization that thinks the way in how things are happening here in Malaysia, and then how it is in let's say Singapore, like it's forward thinking, looking at things way in advance and doing that. Do we have examples like that?
We do have actually plenty of those types of organization, even smaller one looking at 5 years, 10 years, 20 years to
Mm.
look at the different scenario. For example, one of my client, Sime Plantation, they have to look at 20 years from now, 30 years from now, because when they plant a palm oil tree, their cycle is 20 years. You have to
Yep.
wait 10 years for the plant to grow, and
Yep.
you have to forecast what might the weather be into the future. So this is
Mm.
where progressive company, they have spent, I think, hundreds of millions trying to understand what are the trends
Mm.
from a weather perspective, what are the trends from consumer expectation, etc. So from
Mm.
there, this is where the bold leadership comes to the picture, because you need to be able to communicate to the board that we need to prepare for the future. I can't give you dividend on a consistent basis. I need to cut down my dividend so that I can
Mm.
invest for 10 to 15 years from now. So this is where not only the boards needs to be ready, but investors needs to be ready as well, that they see, okay, this is for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yep. Okay, very nice. You asked me whether Suraya's question has been taken care of. Is it, Malar? I'm not sure. Let me go look at Suraya's question.
No.
Uh,
Okay, so I'm just gonna as in I'd love to go for another hour with you because we've got so
yep.
many good questions coming. But so I'll need a quick answer for this. Otherwise,
Mm.
our host Ashok will be very, very hurt. So he's asking, and I think it's a really interesting question. He's asked you, can you elaborate on the statement, you need to know what to innovate? What must be considered for that decision? So how do we decide what to innovate?
Okay, it's a quick one. Is to see, to look at your strategy. Do you need to innovate? Is it your service? Is it your product? Is it your policy? So what we normally do is to start with what needs to change. If we don't change, where are we going to suffer? Then we'll drill down. Okay, for example, we can see that in the next few years, this product is going to be obsolete, or we need to innovate human resource, for example, because we see we have a gap in our talent pool. Then you innovate from a talent perspective. So this is where it's not a single effort. Like Mala, you mentioned, it's systems thinking. You need to see if this is the problem and what are the potential scenarios, and then from there come up with different potential solution, run experiment, maybe option A, option
Mm.
B, and option C. You will only know what is best once you run the experiment. It's difficult to predict upfront. So your portfolio is important.
I'm not sure whether I'm again connecting and summarizing well while Sham thinks about Dr. Sraya's question and he close it. What I'm seeing, the trend I'm seeing from what you're saying is that I think the mindset, whether it's a leadership mindset or why we want to innovate, I think the why has a component of survival. Like the
Yes.
example that you gave about Singapore, right? It
Yes.
is as much as they are ahead of many nations, they are never they never take it for granted. They are always looking at how we could get into trouble. And they put
Yes.
themselves the mindset of we need to survive, right? And then in this case, of course, they go into innovation, they continue to strive by making the systemic changes that is required to support the change that is
Mm.
required for the sustenance of the organization, which is why I think Singapore continues to be a thriving nation, right? And I'm seeing that pattern of the mindset about. So if you're looking at Ashok's question, so if I'm looking at my business, we're looking at, okay, which part of my business might jeopardize the business, and
Mm.
that has got a survival component, and that's where I want to handle innovation first, because I'm not able to do that with the current way of working. I obviously need to do something that we have not thought about before, right? And that's the pattern. Am I saying? Am I understanding you well?
Correct, Mala. But I just want to add on because I don't want
Ah,
to be too
sure.
negative. Because sometimes majority of people in the corporates, they will look at it from I need to survive. But entrepreneurs different. They are looking at how can I grow, how can I generate more revenue, for example. So an example, when we started delving into our software, we have a software called Revolves. We are trying to see, as somebody in consulting, how can we have recurring income? How can we generate income on a regular basis without too much effort? Once you've done it, it's scalable. So this is where you need to have two tracks. One is survival, you need to survive. The other one is to
Grow,
grow. Once you've
grow.
done your survival, you know you are okay, you know you can survive, then you invest your money into finding ways to grow exponentially. So that's we need to find again to find that balance.
I
Hmm.
like that. But can I just clarify? Isn't
Mm,
the growth mindset
mm.
driven by the idea of if we don't grow, we may not survive?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing.
No, it's we are surviving. For example, we are for example company A, we can continue doing what we are doing. However, we want to do something more because we can afford. It's something that we believe in. So it's not about just survival mentality alone. I need to add on this maybe what we call the ikigai. You're doing something because you are believing in what you are doing. It's no longer about survival. You are passionate about what you are doing, and you are actually generating revenue out of it. At the same time, customer value what you have to offer. So that's a different scale of innovation. So you're not talking about survival. You're talking about
Sure.
creating
So
that
the growth
massive impact. Hmm.
So the growth you're talking about here in this particular case is that you use the idea of ikigai, right? It is really I want to make a difference in a
Yes.
greater scale because it is required. It's something that's going to make life better, right?
Yeah.
And so I need to bring in innovation to be able to impact the change in such a large scale because I can't do what I'm doing and expect a great change, right? I can
Yes.
only make incremental change. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Sham, I'm done. I know we need to let Azim go. I'm not too sure whether you'll be able to answer Dr. Sraya's question in one line. She says, I think you spoke about some of these components, right? How can leaders reflect on whether there's right environment ecosystem, which you had mentioned in your conversation in the company? And I like this when they are the ones who are responsible for it. So I think she's talking about yeah, how can leaders take responsibility is what I'm getting from the question.
And that will be a nice way of ending today's session with Azim, which has been like, wow, okay, amazing.
Thank you. I guess the best way to do that is looking back at Tom Peters. I read his book back in 1996. Is
Hmm.
by managing by walking about.
Mm,
That means as leaders, you go down and meet people, talk to people, observe where things are. I think one leader which is doing very well is the current CEO of Post Malaysia. I see in his LinkedIn post, etc. He goes around, hanging around the people who sends the letters, etc. So he's really in touch. There's nobody censoring him from the real data. So that's your job as a leader is to go down on the ground, meet your customers, and then meet your employees without an entourage. So that's one of the things that
nice.
maybe you can gauge where you are really.
Nice. That's a brilliant closing, right? Because I think what I'm hearing is by managing by walking about, it simply means that you are really at the center of the business, the heart of the business. Because a lot of times, in the management hierarchy, you are so far away you may not actually understand the heartbeat of the business, what's running the business, and how the people who are managing the business, what are their own challenges. I think, that was a brilliant close on, in today's topic with Azim Pawanchik, where we are talking about adaptive leaders, how, digitalization, can really work for exponential results. So with that, Azim, thank you so much. I think we could have done 4 episodes with you easily with what you've given us, really. We probably need to do a series of podcasts to drill all the wisdom out of you. Now earlier I just trusted Charmini blindly because she's my lovely partner. But now she has proven that she is a very wise partner, and I shall not question when she wants to bring on speakers. So I think thank you very much, yeah, for sharing so much so clearly, and things that's really really important, and helping us to see the polarities and how to bring it together so that we can adapt in the way we need to, so that we all first survive and thrive eventually. Thank you very much. Yes, Shami, you want to say
Thank you.
goodbye to me nicely?
Yes, I want to say goodbye to Azim as well. I was very busy because I got her to wrap up. But I want to make sure I got that quote down pat and use it as a ending. So thank you so much for saying yes to me and saying yes so soon after we met at that project. Yeah, and it's been a brilliant an hour. Digging into your brain and getting all those insights. And I just love the way you think about innovation and how leaders can play their part in growing that within an organization. So thank you very much for saying yes to us.
Welcome. Okay. Shamini, Mala, thank you for your, I think, willingness to bring me into to your channel, and thank you very much for diligently doing this on a regular basis. We need to you need to continue doing this. A lot of
Oh,
value to the ecosystem here.
Oh, thank
oh, now you make my day. Thank you, Azim. So as we say goodbye, and I know this, like these are times you don't want the 1 hour to end. We must
you.
thank Roslan and Dr. Sraya for all the questions that you've actually put through, and I'm
Yep.
sure we can continue to have the conversation. For those who have stayed back with us, thank you very much. We know we've eaten into 10 minutes of your life. So, with that, till we meet you again next week with another awesome leader, this is Malur signing off from Innovative Malaysia, as Azim said it. I'm so proud. Yes. And
And Sham signing off from Singapore, that's always looking at how we can keep ourselves surviving and thriving. All right. Bye,
and
everyone.
even brilliant, we are collaborating. Bye till we meet again.
Okay.